Welcome back to the Automation Podcast, the world's number one industrial automation product and technology show. Thanks to you, our audience of highly skilled automation professionals. Thank you for being a member of our audience and thank you for tuning back in this week. Now, for those new to the show, my name is Shawn of Insights in Automation, and each week I invite a new vendor to come on the show to tell us about their products and technologies. And during their presentation, I will play the role of the audience, asking questions I think you guys may have. Now, given that a quarter of you out there or more actually only listen to the audio, you don't actually watch the video, I'll also try to call attention to any details in the visuals that I think you folks may want to know about. Now, with that said, I want to welcome Quinton back to the show for I actually reached out to Softing to ask them to talk about this product line because they just expanded it, and I thought this is a great time to get the audience up to speed on this line. I think the last time we had you on it was OPC. Is that correct, Quentin?
I believe that is correct. Yes, looking at some of our OPC UA products.
And I think that was a phenomenal demo. If you guys missed that, and the one thing about their OPC server is that it has I think it's a 72-hour demo mode. So if you need to do a test overnight, it's like the only OPC server you could actually test overnight before you buy a license. Did I have that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it'll run for 72 hours and then it'll shut down, but you can also just restart that again to run another 72 hours. So it is really useful for validating your application before you actually purchase. So I highly recommend that if you're interested in OPC. It's at least something to play with or get your feet wet and make sure it works for you before you actually put any money down.
Yeah, and that was an excellent, really just an excellent demo. I'm actually going to start including it in the courses because 72 hours. I mean, most people when they sit down to do it, they may be there 3, 4 hours. So that'll be long enough for doing any type of demo work and they're learning your product. But you know what? I'm way off track here. Before we jump into the product we're going to talk about today, or the line of products we're going to talk about today, Quentin, just in case somebody did not see the last episode, could you just take a minute and reintroduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Quinton Lowry. I'm in business development and support for Softing, specifically for our industrial automation products. I'm based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. So I have an engineering degree from the University of Tennessee. I've been with Softing for 6 years now.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. I love going to the Smoky Mountains to vacation. So someday I'm going to have to come by and see you guys. But now, the presentation you have up, and you may even do a demo for us, this is about the tManager series of products. There was recently an extension to this product line, which I thought was a great time since it's been extended to get you on to talk about it. So let me just turn it right back to you, and please just jump right into your product presentation. But before we jump in, I want to thank theautomationschool.com for sponsoring this episode of the show. That's where you'll find all of my online courses on Allen Bradley and Siemens PLCs and HMIs. So if you know anybody who needs to get up to speed on those products, please mention theautomationschool.com to them. And now let's jump back into the show.
All right. Thank you, Shawn. Today we're going to talk about our tManager, as Shawn said. We've had a form of the tManager for many years now. It's always been in a Rockwell ControlLogix chassis, but just recently we added the IPC version, so a DIN rail mount standalone version that you can plug in. What's nice about that is that you don't have to have a Rockwell chassis, and it also supports Siemens and Modbus as well as Rockwell and Ethernet IP. So there are 3 variants of that. There's a ControlLogix version, a CompactLogix version, and an IPC version. I'm going to give a short PowerPoint and go an overview of the module line and its capabilities, and then jump into a demo. So we're just going to talk about briefly what people are using this module for, kind of how it's different, being a hardware solution and not a software solution, and an overview of what it's like to set up, and then actually go into the demo and show you how that works. So traditionally, the modules was designed to do track and trace for the automotive industry, is talking between the PLC and a SQL database. So we have a wide variety of database connectivity. Recently, we added connectivity to the cloud. And so today I will show you talking to a database and to the cloud, AWS IoT. So we support Microsoft SQL, Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, most any database that you can think of the common ones. And as well, the way we communicate to the cloud providers is using MQTT. So think of AWS IoT or Azure IoT. Also, any standalone MQTT broker, we have customers using a wide variety of those as well.
But before we get into that, I wanted to thank those of you who signed up in our new membership program, either on YouTube or at theautomationblog.com. In appreciation of your support, you get exclusive access to the videos of episodes that are not sponsored by the vendor. Now, to learn more about our membership program, which is only $10 a month, please visit theautomationblog.com/memberships. And with that, let's go ahead and jump back into this week's episode.
Have customers using it in all kinds of different applications. Like I said, its roots are in track and trace, but think about anything where you want to store or log data. If it's pharmaceutical, food and bev, anything where that data is critical, you can't lose it, whether it be regulated or maybe if for automotive you have a recall or something like that, you need to look up the part numbers that are affected or the serial numbers that are affected. I also have customers using it just to automate things. For instance, we have a customer who they were using a clipboard, believe it or not, it's still out there. But a truck would come in, get weighed, get filled up with product, and on the way back out, it'd get weighed again, and they know how much to charge that particular customer. They set it up to where all that's automated with a badge scanner and the scales tied to a PLC. So when customer comes on, they send the record to the database. When they exit, they update that record with the final weight, and then it's all automated from that point as far as the billing, and it's associated by the badge number that that person used to scan in. So from us, I don't think there's a particular application or anything where this is just a specific use case. It's anything that you're trying to get data back and forth between your PLC and whether it be a database or a cloud provider or MQTT broker. Seen lots of different applications and use cases. I will say the fact that it is a hardware module and that it's in rack on the Rockwell versions, and with the IPC it has it as well. It's just done over Ethernet. If we lose connection to that broker or cloud provider or the database, we have built-in store and forward in the module. We also give status and feedback to the PLC via a handshake tag to let you know if that connection's there, if the transaction was successful, or if we have it in store and forward. So you get a lot of feedback to the PLC directly live to know if your data is being processed appropriately or if there's been any issues. And if there are issues, if you have store and forward turned on, there's several gigs worth built into the module to hold and buffer that data so you don't have downtime. So I think that's kind of a point where the module has a real use case versus a software use case.
Yeah, and I think, there's that dependability of having your device take the data from the PLC and send it and put it into the database to do that transaction, where that all can be done on a PC, right? That all can be done with software. But like you just mentioned, all those features like the store and forward, and it's there. You don't have to worry if somebody turns off the PLC the PC that was doing this, you would have no data. So there's that hardened piece that it's an industrial product sitting in the typically in the electrical enclosure, and
Yep.
it's taking care of getting the PLC data and queuing it and then getting it into the database, and it's hardware based, not PC based. So let me turn it back to you.
No, you're exactly right. And thanks for jumping in there. That's exactly the use case. So this module is a purpose-built device. The only thing that it does is move data back and forth. With that being said, it's designed like a PLC. So there's no OS to manage like you would have with a PC or something like that running software. You don't have to worry about applying updates getting applied to an OS that may break something, or even just the lifetime of PCs now they don't last as long. We have customers that have modules out in the field that are 15 years old and still working. So It's kind of like you said, the robustness of the device, the way that it's designed to be functioning like a PLC. You get it in, make sure it's set up to do what you want, and then it really is set it and forget it. I mean, I get calls from people who know that the module's there, but they don't know how it works. So you're kind of training people again or sending in the manuals and documents from whoever had installed it, is no longer with the company or retired. So that's some of the benefits and use cases of the module is that it is an appliance. You get it in, get it running. It's an embedded device. You don't have to worry about security updates or anything like that. It's locked down. There's no ports open on the module. The only way to configure it is with our software, which I'm going to show in the demo. The only ports that get opened are based off of what you're trying to connect to. So if I open a port to talk to SQL or anything like that, and you can't just nobody can log into it and do anything unless they have the username and password, and for our UI to connect to it, they would need that as well. So we also try to make the user interface super simple and easy for people to configure. So we essentially point to the PLC via an IP address and browse its tags. On the database side, we log in with the credentials and look at the tables, and then you simply drag and drop. So I'm going to say, hey, I want this tag connected to this part of the table, tell it under what conditions you want that transaction to execute, and set it to run. So we'll go through that, but we do try to keep it as simple as possible. Typically, automation guys maybe not as familiar with a SQL database or connecting into the cloud, and we try to make some of that as easy as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge use case right there because, if you're a busy automation guy, you don't have time to debug SQL or transactions. It's like you buy a product, you just drag and drop, and it's connected. And I think that's just so many products in our space. Yes, people can make an HMI out of Visual Basic or Visual Studio, but nobody does it because it's so time intensive. It's just so much faster to put in an HMI with drag and drop components. And that's what you're doing here with this product for getting data from the PLC to a database. So you don't have to, become a database expert. You can just deploy this using the software you're going to show, and it's done. Job completed. Move on to the next one. Back to you, Quinton.
No, that's exactly right. We try to keep it as easy and as clean as possible. And if anybody needs any help, it's normally, hey, here's a link to this document to do that, or here's a video, or we'll jump on a Teams or something like that and resolve it fairly quickly. So it is pretty simple of a device. Try to make everybody's life as easy as possible. I'll use this slide to talk about the differences between the three different versions. So the Compact Logic's tManager, it is in the 1769 form factor. It will talk to the 5069 Compact Logic's PLCs as well. It only talks to Compact Logic's PLC, so that's a little bit different from our Control Logic's version. And I'm just using this to highlight the differences between them. So it communicates via Ethernet IP. It'll talk to up to 3 Compact Logic's PLCs. The IPC version can talk to Compact Logic's, Control Logic, Siemens, Modbus PLCs. It's limited to 3 PLCs as well, but it can talk to all those. And it's not just one at a time. It's however you want to configure it.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to jump in here and pay some bills. Thank you, first of all, for listening to this episode. And while today's vendor wasn't able to sponsor this episode, I still wanted to invest the time to bring it to you because I think you're like me. You like to learn about new products and technologies. So with all that said, I'd like to ask you to consider becoming a member for just $10 a month, either on YouTube or at theautomationblog.com. to help me offset the cost of producing these episodes each week. In exchange for your membership, you will receive member-only perks, including access to my daily news show and ad-free editions of every unsponsored episode of this show. With that said, thanks again for tuning in this week, and now we'll return you to this week's episode.
The Control Logics has all that capability as well, but it's got a little bit more robustness in it, and it can talk to 16 controllers, even some of the older PLCs. So if you have a bridge card in your rack that's going out to some of your older things like Slicks or PLC 5s, it can actually still talk to those as long as it has a network path. I say all that just to kind of give the differentiation between the three. They're all configured using the same UI. They all have the same capabilities as far as the calls they make on the SQL database or what they're publishing to the cloud. So those really are just the differences. It's the amount of PLCs and the type of PLCs that they can connect to. They all can talk to a wide variety of databases or cloud providers, like I said. They all have the same storm port, and they all have two Ethernet ports. I will cover that. The reason there's two Ethernet ports is typically your database may not be located on the same network as your plant, right? Your automation devices are typically on a different network than your business system. They don't have to be. If you have everything on one network, then you only need to use one port. But if they are separate, it just gives you an easy way to link the database portion to that and the plant side to the other one. There's no routing between those from a security concern or anything like that. They are electrically isolated from each other, but I do want to point that out. That's why there's two Ethernet ports on there. And so that's just a real rough overview of the module, or the modules, I should say. Right now I'm showing a slide. So in my office here, I have a ControlLogix rack. I have a ControlLogix tManager in it. I'm going to talk across the backplane to a L7. We'll gather data from it, send it to the cloud. We'll also send it to the database. There's a blue and a yellow line for those watching. That's just designating the two networks. So in my office here, isolated to just a couple devices, I have my PLC, my tManager, a CompactLogix PLC, and my SQL database. It's not on the Office network. For me to get out to AWS to send that data to the cloud, I have to get on the Office network. So I'm using that second port to tie into the Office and get out onto the web to talk to AWS. So if you were watching the video, you would see that, but that is the setup. So in my office, I have all my local stuff, just like it would be isolated on the plant floor. I have my PLCs, my Studio 5000, and a SQL database. My second port on my tManager is going out to the cloud to talk to it. So I don't want my PLCs and stuff like that on that network. So that's why they're isolated from it.
Now, that brings up a good point, and I didn't see this earlier. It may have been in your slides, and I didn't see it. But we just talked about how many devices each module can work with, PLCs, right? Is there a number of databases and a tag limit per module?
That's a good point. I should have covered that. There's not a tag limit. There is a transaction limit. So there's 25 transactions per module, but there's not a tag limit that you put in each transaction. So that is something to be aware of. There's not a database connectivity limit either. I mean, we've got people that talk to, I normally don't see a ton of that, but we do have customers who talk to 3 or 4 or 5 different databases at the same time with one module. So that is a little bit different of other things that you may have seen out there. So I have customers, I guess that's to be clear as well. The module can do inserts, which is just writing data to a database. It can do updates, which is going in, not creating a new record, but just changing values for a record that's already in the database. Selecting is calling a select is when it goes into the database and pulls data back out of it and writes it down to the PLC. And then stored procedures can be anything on the database. Think of that as a function or a program that somebody's written that resides in SQL. From the module's perspective, it just has inputs and outputs. So we send data in, it responds and sends data out. We don't care what happens in between. We just care about, hey, what are those variable types? What does that data look like that's coming back out? And we write that back down to the PLC as well. I say all that to say, I have customers who do recipe management with a module. It's a really popular application, I guess. So if you think about, you have a line that maybe it's running a CNC machine or some type of robot that's doing different parts. Instead of storing the parameters for the different part numbers and the different variables all in the PLC, they'll store them in the database. So the operator comes on, types in a specific part number, the module goes to the database, looks up that part number and pulls down its parameters. I have a particular use case for a customer where they actually pull down roughly 8,000 data points and write that to tags in the PLCs. Now they're only using one transaction to do that. But back to your point about tag limit, it's kind of unique in that there is a transaction limit, but when we're actually pulling data back down, we don't have a tag limit on reading or writing to the database. So each application's a little bit different. If anybody has an idea, they're like, hey, would this module be a good fit for this particular thing that we're trying to do? Feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about how it would be done or set up a demo and actually walk through that as well.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of Transaction Manager or Rascal back from the late 90s, early 2000s. And, if you had, three different sets of, let's just call them data logs that you wanted to store in a database that, with different rates of storing data and different tags, those would be three different transactions.
That's
And
correct.
yeah, so you got to keep in mind like that. Now, fetching data out of a database is so extremely helpful because a lot of times your production data is in the database and people really struggle with that. And it's not as hard as it sounds. You tell it, a lot. I remember an ice cream company. I worked with them, and they only all they had was the barcode number that they were running, but they wanted to display on the HMI all the stuff about this, the recipe and the name, because the marketing names these days change on different flavors a lot, and so by connecting that with the database that was managed in the front office, it just opened the world to them on the plant floor. And so, 25 is actually quite a bit. And I want to say one other thing too. I don't think this slide where we're seeing as Microsoft SQL Server on the plant floor and AWS, some cloud, Azure or some cloud based platform or front office based platform. I don't think this is, I think this is actually probably more typical because, especially in my courses when I'm teaching Factory Talk View, I'm showing people, hey, you got a database here. You can use it for all kinds of stuff. And Rockwell's done has all kinds of objects that can read database tables for you. And so a lot of times, yeah, you want to collect the data from these different PLCs and put them in one database that may be on your plant floor, but you also want to get data to the front office. And a lot of times they want different data than you want, right? You're more concerned about keeping the line running. They're probably more concerned about what's running. That's where you do your update, right?
Yep.
And then your historical, like, hey, what was, how much scrap did we have? How many good products did we have? How long was it per product? OEE kind of stuff, right? And
Yep.
so, yeah, just all these thoughts are coming flooding through. But let me turn it back to you, Quinton.
No, that's spot on. Like I said, the application use cases are limitless, really. If you have data and you want to store it somewhere, PLCs are used everywhere. Like connecting it from the PLC to the database. We don't have a particular application, so we have it in all different types of use cases. But you're spot on. A lot of the times it is using OEE, and sometimes it's, hey, like I said, we're just trying to automate our process. We're not saving it off for the business side or anything like that. And other times it is like, hey, our orders come in online now. They're written to this database. We want something that can go up there, look at those, write it back down to the PLC, and then we can run the line, right? So it just depends. Everybody's got their own unique application. Um, so with that being said, I'll jump over into the demo now.
Hey guys, Shawn jumping back in here to let you know about one of the new services I'm offering from my new downtown office. In addition to custom in-person training and virtual training, I'm also now offering one-on-one mentoring. This is a service that grew out of my online courses at theautomationschool.com, driven by students who completed my courses, were competent in their jobs, but then they would run into difficult or confusing applications, and they wanted to hire me to sit with them virtually and review their projects, review their code, and ask questions. And I got to tell you, it's gone really well with the students I've done this with, and so now I'm releasing it to the public. If you want to know more, please use the contact link at either theautomationschool.com or theautomationblog.com. Now, another service I'm offering is the result of vendors and users coming to me and saying, Shawn, you got all that equipment in your studio. Could you test this for me? Or could you set up my computer and make sure it communicates to all those devices? And so I'm also offering PC configuration and application testing right here in my downtown office. So if you're interested in that, you can use the same two contact links to get in touch with me. And with that, that's all I have right now. Let's return to this week's episode of the Automation Podcast.
So this is our UI. It's pretty simple. You only really use it when you're configuring the module, setting it up, you set it to run, and then you log out, right? The module, it's all contained within the hardware itself. To log into the module, you simply input either one of the IP addresses of the module, hit connect after having the username and password in there. You have a basic status page. You can see how hard the CPU is working. Right here, you can see there's roughly 10 gigs worth of store and forward that we could utilize. And the RAM, there's 4 gigs of it. If you want to tie this module into an AOP on your Logix controller, you can definitely set that up. I don't have this set up right now. We're going to set this module up, but do be aware that you can do that. You get some status and feedback to the PLC. We won't go into the details of all of that, but it's definitely something that you can set up. You don't have to. The way the module communicates is similar to an HMI. It's class 3 SIP communication on the Rockwell side, so it is something to be aware of. I'll jump through some of the settings, but I don't want to bore everybody with all the settings, right? I'll touch some of the highlight things and then we'll actually jump into some transactions and wrap it up. So obviously a couple things that you'd play with are the Ethernet ports. It's pretty basic setup, DHCP or static. If you're using any DNS servers or gateways, you can configure that here. This is where you configure the 2 Ethernet ports. For those that aren't watching the video, if you're listening, it's your standard configuration for Ethernet ports. Right below that, there's another button for network diagnostics that just allows you to do pings and trace routes from the hardware module itself. So to be clear, it's not from this PC that's running the UI, but it actually takes the path that the module is going to take. So that's useful. Something else that I recommend everybody set up is having a time source for the module. So think about if power's out for a long time and the battery for the real-time clock was to run out, how does it sync its time back up? So we can sync with a PLC that we're connected to, or we can sync to an NTP server that's on the network. So if you have a network time protocol on the network, a lot of times customers will have their SQL server be an NTP server as well. It's just a service you run on that machine, and so you can get the module syncing up with it. If you're going out to the cloud and you have internet access, then there's a lot of free ones. There's an ntp.org. You could just point it to one of those and it's gonna sync its time with that. Licensing, you shouldn't have to worry about it, but you order a module, you tell it what database you want licensed with. If you wanted to have multiple database types, that's when you'd bump into an additional licensing. So it's something to be aware of. We do have updates come out occasionally. They're free, download, install. It's pretty simple. Just point it to the file, hit update, and the module takes over on its own, and it'll come back up in 5 to 10 minutes. And you can reconnect to it and play again. You can create different usernames and passwords as well for the module if you wanted to restrict access to certain users where they can only come in and view things but can't alter or change anything. You can set that up. Most of the time that's used with our OEMs and integrators when they're working together with end customers and they're trying to divvy out different roles. So there's not only the viewing role, but you can say, hey, this person can only touch the IT net or the database side of stuff. This person can only play with the PLC side of stuff. So there's a lot of different roles there as well. But for what everybody cares about, it's the projects. So I don't have any configured right now. I'm going to click new. We'll just type in demo as the project name. I'll double click on it and it's going to open up the project editor. And it put it in my separate screen over here, so I'll drag it over. You can see up here's that 25 transaction limit. So what we're going to do is we'll connect to a controller, we'll connect to a database, to the cloud, and then we'll set up transactions. So for the controller, I already have some defined, but let me delete that. It's really easy. You simply input the IP address. So I right click under whether it's Ethernet IP, Modbus, or Siemens, connect to a new module, pick the type. We're going to say 192.168.1.103 for my compact Logix. I hit OK. It turns green. that just means, hey, we have successful connection. I right click on it, say open tag list, and there's the controller and program tags. We support UDTs and arrays. It's really easy. So that component's done. For the one that's in rack, it's really easy as well. You just right click on it and say configure selected module and give it a name. It'll turn green as well. To connect to the database, you say new database application, pick what you're trying to connect to. So in my case, Microsoft SQL. Input the IP address or host name, the database name, a username and password. I hit validate connection. That just is like a check. Hey, can I log into that database with these credentials? And it says it was successful. From there, the way we look at the database to know what the table structure is and the column names, we hit enumerate. And we see what access we have with that particular user. That's something I bump into occasionally when we are talking to a database that's on the business side of the house. It's like being used for a lot of different things. Maybe it's financials or customer information, stuff like that. Is they're worried about the module having access to things. You can set up a user on SQL that is limited to whatever you want it to have access to. So if it's a particular table or a particular stored procedure, they can set that up. And then when the module logs in, that's all that it has access to. So it is something to be clear.
And
But
that's
in my,
something you want because you
yep,
don't want to be blamed for writing over somebody else's tables or
that's
data.
exactly right.
So you
Yep.
say, give me my own user. I only want access to my table. Please don't give me access to anybody else's.
Yep. And along that that same narrative, the module cannot do deletes directly. So we said inserts, updates, selects, and stored procedures. It was intentionally left out for people to be able to do deletes directly. Now, if somebody needed to do a delete, they could create a stored procedure that does a delete. But it's funny because of what you just said. Hey, we're trying to typically, like I said, this is for the automation engineer to set up. The database guy can set up a stored procedure to do deletes if that's what they want to do. But it is funny that you're talking about that because it's kind of in the same path that they don't want you to be messing stuff up, so to speak, or something like that, or have an accident on deleting something you're not supposed to. Um, but with that being said, here's the tables, views, and stored procedures that we have access to with this user. I'll just click select all so that I can play with all of them if I want to. I hit OK. It looks at those, grabs their names, their variable types, the data types of those columns, and pulls that in. So we're done. We've connected to the PLC, connected to the database. Now we can set up a transaction. So I click the transaction button in the middle, new transaction. Now, if we just wanted to write data to the database, we'll do a new DB insert. It opens up another window. You can connect to multiple databases like we said. So I click database, select the one that I've defined, and then under that, it's what table do you want to write to. In my case, I'll say the work in process table. And this is just to replicate, hey, we have a table. It's got operator, timestamp, cycle time, line number in it. It's just a replicate a production line. I'll pull open Studio 5000. And you can see we look in here, I have a production count tag. It's just on a counter to increment every 2 seconds to replicate, hey, every 2 seconds we're getting product in. The module is going to monitor this tag. When it sees that it's changed, we're going to send data. So we'll write a new record to the database every 2 seconds, populating those values I read off earlier. So if I go to controller tags, pick my PLC, and then I can simply drag and drop this in here. It's really easy. If they were all together, I could shift highlight and drag them all in at once, but I have them spread out. Or if they were in an array or a UDT, you could just grab them all at once as well. With my module, you can, like I said, if you have a time source, you can take the timestamp that the module has itself, populate that in there. You can also do a bunch of things to manipulate the data before writing it up or anything like that. Another one would be to add a constant. So I'll put my name in there. Simply hit this button to connect them all. And I'm almost done. So we've told it, these are the tag values we want to take. This is where we want to write them to in the database. Now we need to tell it under what condition to do that.
Now, before you do that, I'm going to interrupt
Yep.
you for a second.
Yeah.
For the audio audience, when we added the table, right, or you could add different things, but we added a table, all of the basically the fields in that table came up. We have operator, we had time, we got cycle time, we got line number. That came up as a list of boxes on the right-hand side, right? Think of it as like very small, like function blocks boxes. On the left-hand side, we have the tag browser, and Quinton was just dragging in randomly well, not randomly, but he was just dragging in what he wanted. He was searching through the tag browser and just dragging them in, and he was lining them up so they would line up, in order. So time went to time, and cycle time went to cycle time, line number
Right.
went to line number, and so on. And so he lined everything up on the left-hand side so they would be directly across from the fields in the table on the right-hand side, and then he hit a button, and boom. Now, what if do they always have to be lined up like that? What if you weren't perfect and timestamp was at the bottom? Would you be
Yeah.
able to manually,
Yeah.
move them around?
So you can manually connect them as well.
Ah, okay. Okay, great.
So
Yep.
if I had them off or something like that,
Yep.
then
Yep.
like you can see there, I can just drag it to wherever I want.
hmm
Um,
hmm
so
But it
yep.
is easier to line them up. I can
It's
see that. Yeah.
easier, yeah, especially if you're doing a bunch of them. But yeah, you can do it either way. There's a button for if you've dropped them in or they're lined up
Mhm.
already. But if not, you can just manually connect them however you want.
Now, let me ask you this question. So I saw you added for the operator in the database, you added
A
just
constant.
a constant with your name on
Yep.
it, right?
Yep.
But I think right before that, you were saying that I could massage the data. So if I
That's
needed
correct.
to, for instance, I needed to multiply the pass count by 2 because I want to look really good,
Yep.
right? And maybe divide the fail count by 2.
Yep.
I could do that in here, and nobody would
Correct.
be the wiser. I'm
Yep,
not.
that's exactly
I'm
right.
being funny.
Yeah,
Yeah. Good.
yeah. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different conversions. Like math is one of them.
hmm
Another one would be actually maybe you can't change the PLC and the
hmm hmm
database and you need them to match up. Maybe I need to do a conversion from like a string to an
Ah,
integer or a float to
yes.
a string or something like that. Or
Perfect.
a common one's a date time. So a date time is a column type in the database. That's actually what I have right here is a date time.
Mm,
Um, so that's a specific thing for Microsoft SQL. Maybe I want to convert that to a string to write it back down into the PLC and be able to read it that way,
yeah.
since date time's not a variable type in logics, right? So there's a lot of different types of conversions that take place, bit operations. You can even create your own. Um, so yeah, encrypt data before sending it up. All kinds of stuff are built into that could be utilized. So
Yeah, I think the date time formats are very new to Logix, very, very new. I'm just going by
oh,
memory
okay.
here. So yeah, if you have anything older, you're not going to have all those 64-bit date time that other PLCs have that Logix didn't have for many years. So that's extremely helpful to be able to convert that, either way, which is I think is really cool.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, so a lot of times I've had like when we were talking about recipes, maybe the operator's changing the recipe on the fly built for that day's conditions, or if something's off. So they'll have a select that goes in, and so they may have a part number that's got multiple entries, but the differentiator is, hey, this one was from 3 months ago, this one was from a year ago, which one do I want to pull? So they can actually pull that record in, and you can do an order by. So I want to pull in the oldest, the newest, or based off of a certain time, and they can pull that back down into the PLC and look at it on the HMI and be like, yeah, that's the one I want. I wanted the one dated for this particular date. So it can be useful for sure. But like I said, once you have everything connected, we need to tell it under what conditions we want it to execute this and send that data up. A lot of different options here for how you want to do that. The most common is, hey, we're going to monitor a tag in the PLC, look for its value to change, or if you wanted to do a Boolean, fire on the rising edge of that Boolean, changing from 0 to 1. Always fire if it's just something you want to gather data from. If it's a process, you can see there's lots of different options in here. I'm going to do change because, like I said, we just have that production count tag in there. It's incrementing every time it increments. We want to store data associated with it. So I'll take that tag in my tag browser, pull it into my trigger window, and this just says every scan period, check this tag. If its values change from the last time we scanned it, we'll write that data to the database. Now, something that's a little bit different, maybe people have caught on to or not, you're not seeing me hit save on anything. So as I hit OK, it's writing that to the solid state drive in the module. You can see up here, I can stop the module as a whole. I can start and stop individual projects. I'll start that one. And then even within that, you can start and stop individual transactions as well. So you can come online with the module, alter and edit certain components of it without ever causing downtime for the other components that you're not trying to mess with. So that's kind of a nice feature to have. Or you get a particular line up, need to come online and add a second line, but you don't want to mess with the first line that's already got its transactions done. You can set that up. So I set everything to run. You can see it's incrementing. We get a lot of good information here as far as how fast everything's executing and the different components. So on average, we're running at like 20 milliseconds. Now, obviously, the more you load the module up and the more data is being sent, that's going to slow down. And it's not just the module itself, it's the PLC's response time and the database's response time. Another useful thing is you can click a debug button and it'll show you a one-shot of the data being passed to the SQL database. But if we wanted to actually go look at SQL, I'll come in, hit execute, and you can see we've written 31 rows of data each time based off of that production count tag changing and just populating that in there. So it's really easy to configure. We'll do something similar with the MQTT side now as well. So here's my AWS dashboard. I actually need to go to IoT Core. So IoT Core is an AWS service. It's got an MQTT broker in it. I'm logged into my user. I'm going to the settings tab, and from there I can copy my endpoint, which is unique to my account. If I come back over to where I configured my SQL database, if I click new database application, you can see there's new MQTT. Select it, paste that endpoint in there. AWS does require encryption and uses certificates to do that. So I hit the Advanced tab, enable SSL TLS, user certificates, and I've previously loaded mine in here, but if I had not, I would need to import them. And they're just generated from AWS. I'll load them into the tManager so that it can use those to make the connection to AWS. I hit OK. Now in this case, there's publish, which is writing to MQTT. Subscribed is reading data back down from MQTT. We're going to publish to MQTT in this case. So that's new outbound transaction. Click on application. You can see my MQTT adapter. So you notice we didn't enumerate a table or see the table names because a table doesn't exist, right? It's a little bit different. The way MQTT keeps things straight is by topic name. So when I write to a particular topic, anything subscribed to that topic receives the data. So when we were looking at my dashboard, it's subscribed to receive data from tManager 01 Turbine 1. So if I click this gear right here, go into my MQTT endpoint, I want to write specifically to tManager 01 turbine 1. I can hit validate connection, and then that lets me check, hey, can I write to this topic with everything I've configured this far, like my endpoint name, my certificates, and it tells me, yes, I have access to that. So I'll select it. And like I said, since there's not a table or structure exist, you have to feed it a JSON schema. The module will create that for you if it's in an array or a UDT. So in my case, I have a UDT. It's called wind turbine. And if we actually look at my dashboards again, you can see I have a wind turbine dashboard. It's got RPMs, torque, wind direction, average power, and speed. So I'm going to write data. And some of these, the averages, it's just going to take that data as it comes in and average them and do a point like every 5 minutes. Other, it's going to be the raw data as it comes in. But this is what we're going to populate. So I have tags in the PLC that match that. So I come back to my UDT, I right click on it, say generate JSON schema. You can, I just do win demo. It imports it. I can now select it and it just matches that UDT tag structure. So you can see it's got the UDT name wind turbine and then it's got the timestamp, wind speed, RPM, etc. for that. I can now shift highlight these from my tag browser, drag those in just like we did on the SQL side to match up, hit connect. We're almost done. We need to tell it under what conditions we want this thing to execute. In this case, we're just going to set it to fire not off of something happening, but we're just going to say, hey, every second, let's send the data up. So I'll say always, hit OK, select that trigger to always fire every second, save that off. And now I just need to start my trigger that's running every second and start my MQTT endpoint where we're sending the data, and you can see that count starting to increment as well. If I wanted to see the raw data again, I could hit that debug button. It's getting passed in, and then if we jump back to AWS, you can see we're now populating that data in there. Like I said, the averages run every couple minutes, so it's going to take all that data in and then it'll run an average for it and put it on there every 5 minutes or so. But that's how the MQTT portion works as well. And that's it. We could dive into other stuff if anybody had any questions, but I think I've run over a little bit on Shawn's time already. But hopefully everybody finds that useful. It is connecting to Rockwell PLCs, Siemens PLCs, and Modbus PLCs as well. And so the connection to the PLC side, you just pick those out, and then the same capabilities are feasible for SQL, the brokers, the cloud connectivity as well.
Yeah, I think on the AWS side or on the MQTT side, you got to learn a little bit about the JSON.
Yep.
If you're you can take your tags, right click on them, create that file, but you needs to match what you've set up in AWS. You may not always be the one setting up AWS or Azure.
That's
So you may
correct.
have some JSON file editing to do with your partner on that side. But aside from that, that was as easy as doing it for the database. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really good. Yeah.
You're exactly right. So since there's not a defined structure with like the table, whatever you're trying to feed on the back end, you all need to agree to some type of format. In my case, I'm populating a dashboard. There's another thing, if you just wanted to see the MQTT data coming in, I guess we'll say raw or before it's getting populated anywhere, we can go do that real quick. If we go to the MQTT test client and just do a subscribe, you can see the actual packet format as it's coming in. And so that's just another view. That's what it looks like. What I have set up is that it's looking for this data on that particular topic name, and AWS is pulling those values out and populating them on my dashboards. But you're exactly right. There needs to be an agreement between whoever's setting up the back end, whatever's going to use this data that's being populated from the PLC, and what that structure is looks like and how it's defined.
Yeah, and just for those who are listening, what we're seeing here is in the window is we're just seeing wind turbine, and then we're seeing each tag name in quotes, and then a colon, and then the actual value.
That's
So it
exactly right.
looks like you're looking at a text file in Notepad. So it's
Correct.
nothing scary here. But
Nope.
yeah, it may be something new if you haven't. Like I did a MQTT for the audience. I think it's been a couple of years now. So if you're not doing it every day, you may not remember it, but it's easy to get your hands on. And I'm sure the guys who out there listening who have already done it, the guys and gals are kind of like, all right, Shawn, be quiet. But in any case, no, thank you for showing that.
For sure.
And it sounded like that was it. Was there anything else you wanted to show us?
No, I mean, the module does have storm forward. We can write status and feedback to the PLC, but I think that's the gist of it. I mean, we could spend hours going into the detailed settings of things, but there's no need to do that, I don't believe. So I appreciate you having us on.
No, I appreciate you coming on, Quinton. I knew this was, especially with the new standalone modules. So if you're not
For
using a
sure.
Rockwell, in America, I know a lot of people do, but if you're using a Modbus based or Siemens based PLC, now you have another option there that's just in RAM mount IPC all ready to go. But I guess I want to go back to what you said earlier is, if somebody's out there, right? And so, if you're in the audience, you're like, this sounds like something I want. Who should they reach out to? And I know you said this at the beginning, but I'm just going to say it, ask you to say it again. Who should they contact if they're like, I think this is right for me?
Yeah, I mean, our we have some general lines depending on what you're trying to do. If it's more of like, hey, I'm interested in this, I want to see a demo or get pricing, then reach out to sales.us@softing.com. If it's more of a technical question of like, how's this thing work or what are its capabilities, you can send that to support.us@softing.com. I don't know. You can also reach out to me directly. I guess I didn't put a slide in there for that. But it's Quinton, Quinton Lowry, Lowry @softing.com. So any of those we'll be able to get you pointed in the right direction and get you taken care of.
Well, Quentin, I really appreciate your time today. I really liked going through this. I hadn't seen this in so long that it was a great refresher for me. I can already think of all these applications I could use it on. So thank you again for coming on, taking time out of your day to come on the show and bring us up to speed on the tManager.
I really appreciate you having us on. I think it's great that you're doing this for the industry and for the community. So thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I want to thank Quentin for taking time out of his busy schedule to come on the show and bring us up to speed on the tManager, not only to give us the presentation, but also to give us the demo. I really appreciate that. I also appreciate the members who get access to the video edition of this show because this show is not sponsored by Softing, so the audio is, of course, free to the public, but the video is a member perk for just $9.99 a month. Thank you to all you members out there. With that said, if you did enjoy this episode, please do not forget to give it a like, a sub, a share, and if you're on the audio platforms, give us a 5-star review. That is the only surefire way to grow our audience and find new vendors to come on the show. And of course, if you know anybody looking for PLC, HMI, or SCADA training, please tell them about my website, theautomationschool.com. I do online training. I also do in-person training now. I've already had 8 classes already, and I love doing them. Right now, I'm only doing 1 to 4 students, so kind of custom training per company. But in any case, please, if you know anybody looking for training, please let them know about theautomationschool.com. And I just want to wish you all a great week. I want to wish you good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.